Right. So we are live now with Kevin and Steve. And Steve is a regulatory lead in the Isle of Man government and has a great, experience in understanding how a lot of projects that that came from the 2016 onwards, post ICU times and post the whole cryptonization that happened in the circuits post Ethereum. Has a lot of understanding, from that and how it has changed, how it is evolving. We get to know a lot of things. Kevin's going to be, leading. Kevin's the co-founder of Block Asset Management. Block Asset Management is sponsoring Incrypted Asia today as well. And thank you so much, Kevin, for the support that you showed us. Really looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are and how, what questions do you feel fit to be asked to Steve. Also, one addition from my side is that I have around a couple of projects coming on blockchain as well. I've set up entities for the same in the US, not operating at all the in India has some entities as well, but I don't hold any crypto in the Indian entities, and everything happens from the US side. And now we're looking forward to regulations in Switzerland for the foundation, so that we can kind of move that whole segment into a foundational segment. And it's all for a normal person who's like, let's say, in India or coming from a developing country. Not everyone has access to all this information, and that's also like a bottleneck when it comes to launching projects. Even if they're good engineers, they don't have that kind of financial expertise and understanding and regulatory expertise to basically go forum shopping or something and find out what's going on. So really looking forward to hearing from you, Kevin and Steve. Thank you so much for being here with us at Incrypted. Thank you. So over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and in some cases, good evening, because I am aware of at least one attendee from Australia. So firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and to thank the team at Incrypted Asia as well. My name is Kevin Ballard, and I am co-founder and CCO of Block Asset Management. We are managers of the world's first digital assets fund of funds, Blockchain Strategies Fund, which is also a Wealth Tech 100 company. We are proud to be the main sponsor for Incrypted Asia, and I look forward to making some new contacts along the way today. I'm pleased to be moderating this session with Steve Billinghurst from the Isle of Man government to discuss an offshore jurisdictional view on crypto regulations. So Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us briefly about your position?
So hi, my name, I'm Steve Billinghurst. I work with the Isle of Man government as the regulatory lead. I don't actually work in the regulator. I don't work with the regulatory authority, but I do work alongside them. And my role is to understand and to propose regulatory changes within the environment that makes the Isle of Man more crypto business friendly. And also, when businesses come to the Isle of Man, I help them land successfully by understanding what the regulatory.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's dive in, because I'm sure I know I've got a few questions for you, and hopefully they will be questions that the audience will be keen to hear the answers for. So let's start off with crypto regulation in general is obviously a rather grey area. What's the current state of crypto regulation in the Isle of Man, and how does it compare, say, to other jurisdictions?
Sure. The crypto regulation in the Isle of Man actually has been around for some time. It was back in 2013 that the Isle of Man recognised cryptocurrencies as a virtual currency and as a concept and a construct similar to normal money and normal currency. And so back in 2013, we amended our Proceeds of Crime Act and our using DLT as a core technology within their operations. That meant that we were open to huge numbers of different businesses across the whole industry spectrum. As a result of the expansion of cryptocurrency and decentralized finance, we've begun to establish more crypto-specific regulations. And the key one is the recognition that in 2015, we recognized that cryptocurrency, virtual currency businesses needed to come under the AML CFT framework. And so we created a framework for all cryptocurrency businesses to actually be registered and be reviewed for AML and CFT. And that is based upon international best practice set out by FATFA, the Financial Action Task Force. And it beats and it was about 5 years ahead of the UK, which is only just brought out the EU's 5th money laundering directive, which does the same.
Okay, so basically looking from an offshore jurisdiction then and a smaller jurisdiction per se, we've seen the likes of Malta and maybe Gibraltar take the lead. The Isle of Man are sort of following suit, so being that smaller jurisdiction can be helpful, would you say?
Yeah, the Isle of Man isn't a regulatory jurisdiction that's going to come first in setting any regulatory framework around crypto. One of my roles is to horizon scan and look at what other jurisdictions are doing and to take their best practices and match those best practices to our regulation and suggest corrections to our regulatory framework. So it's interesting, you'll have seen that Gibraltar has gone significantly down the road of recognizing DLT business issue tokens, digital tokens and digital assets. The one difference with the Isle of Man is the fact that we don't have a marketplace and we don't have a market division within our regulator. And so that means that it's that digital assets and the trading of digital assets is something that isn't regulated. But digital currencies have been, as I said, since 2015. And the way that the legislation is drawn up, it's very principle based, and it allows for a wide variety of cryptocurrency businesses to make the Isle of Man their home.
Okay, so how and maybe where do you see regulation developing?
Oh, well, I mean, the speed of regulation that we're currently seeing, I think, has just grown exponentially. Actually, the speed of change within the UK as a result of the UK leaving Europe and the implications that has caused, the new chairman of the SEC and his preponderance for crypto and a greater understanding of it. In the Far East, you see Hong Kong and Singapore driving recognition and regulation around cryptocurrencies, with Japan not far behind them. You know, I think that the pace of change is not going to slow down. It's only going to get faster. And as always with regulation, there's a need for regulatory authorities to always catch up with technology and always catch up with new business ideas. I don't see them kind of leading from the front on this. But I think we all know that right now the focus for regulators is very much in the area of AML, of money laundering, and trying to get to grips with the way that virtual currencies are being used as a transfer of value on a peer-to-peer basis, or on a transfer of digital assets through virtual asset service providers. And that's going to take, I think, the good part of 2021 for the regulators and the industry to actually sort that out.
There was an interesting talk yesterday that touched base on the ban ban that India put in place on cryptocurrencies. You know, and that was, you know, it was interesting to hear the view there that it was just something that they couldn't really enforce, and it was a quick turnaround on that. And do you have any view on that, on the likelihood of crypto bans, or what are your thoughts on governments looking to ban cryptos, which may be a fear that some people have?
Actually, I think we've gone through that stage. I think that the governments have learned to live with digital currencies and virtual currencies or cryptocurrency, any of those terminologies. They've learned to live with them, and they're learning to understand them. And COVID and the impact of the pandemic over the last year has done nothing but accelerate that need to understand digital currency and the way in which digital currency and some of its offshoots in terms of stable coins and other methods of value transfer on a digital platform actually have come to the forefront. So I don't think it's so much now about banning. I think it is very much about understanding, and it's about controlling. And I think we'll probably find a pendulum swing where we'll get to probably some really tight controls. And I think there'll be some really tight controls around AML and CFT under this FATFA travel rule. But I think over time, that will probably swing back a bit, and we'll find that both businesses and individuals are working within those rules, and we'll also find that regulators are becoming more comfortable with those rules and actually being able to work with the industry to regulate them in a proportionate way.
Okay, well, we'll circle back. I think if we've got time at the end, I'll circle back. So I'd like to just touch on CBDCs. But I mean, how does smaller offshore jurisdictions like the Isle of Man manage its own objectives within the global direction of travel?
Yeah, we're very much, you know, we recognise as a jurisdiction that we're not going to set regulatory pace, and we're not going to set the direction of regulation. So we are, in that respect, a kind of a smart follower of other jurisdictions. What needs to be ensured is the fact that we are also as fast a follower as we can be. And that's obviously a very fine balance between regulatory resource and the demand for different regulations to when people come to the island and look to set up here. I mean, we probably are going to work through, well, we will be working through the travel rule. We will be working through the crypto assets discussion paper that the EU has put out. We will be looking at stable coins. We probably won't yet be looking quite hard at decentralized finance. I'm expecting that probably to take another 12 to 18 months to kind of mature as a marketplace. But what we've got, as I said, what we've got as a regulatory framework can cope with pretty much anything that gets thrown at us. And that's because if you are running a decentralized finance operation, but it is akin to a bank, because you're running a deposit-taking business and it's akin to a bank, it will be treated as a bank whether or not you're using digital currencies, or whether or not, and decentralized finance, or whether or not you're using centralized fiat currency. That doesn't matter. But I think our direction of travel is very much travel rule, markets in crypto assets, and stable coins, and what was the last one? Yeah, certainly those three are the next three in our line of sight.
Okay, and then given the continuing pace of developments of regulation in crypto finance, how can the Isle of Man maintain pace with its own regulatory evolution?
Well, that's a really interesting question. For the size of our jurisdiction, I think it's not easy. Our pace is very much derived out of the resources that we put to it, and our resources put to it are very much derived out of the popularity, to a certain extent, of businesses coming to the Isle of Man. The more businesses that come to the Isle of Man in this space, the more that the Isle of Man will drive that, will be needs to drive for change faster, I believe. But as it is, we recognise that there are areas where we need to make a change. As I said, I don't see the Isle of Man being a regulatory setter. It will be not at the beginning. It won't set the pace, but it will follow as quickly as it can do. And what small jurisdictions offer is they offer that closeness. I work, as I said, very much with businesses, and I work as a strong go-between between businesses and the regulators themselves. And that's what you get in a small jurisdiction. If we were in the UK, dare I say it, trying to get to the FCA and get C, and I suspect it's the same with FINMA in Switzerland, BaFin in Germany, and MAS and the Hong Kong regulator, perhaps not so much, because I think they're a little bit more turned on to this, as I also think of the Japan FSA. But certainly I think in Europe and America, finding a regulator that's got the time and space to think about this and to actually react to the marketplace is not very easy. But in a small jurisdiction, Gibraltar, us, perhaps Malta, not so much, I don't think. I think we have a role to play because we can work faster than the others when an issue comes in front of us.
Okay, well, let's take a step back then and not look at it maybe so as the Isle of Man perspective, but can I ask you, in general, what are your thoughts on the drive for regulatory oversight of all digital currency transactions in comparison to that for physical currency transactions as it stands?
Yeah, I was listening, really interesting question, Kevin, because I was listening to a presentation a couple of days ago on digital currencies, and there was a talk about, okay, it was in the central bank digital currency space rather than in sort of the cryptocurrency space, but I think the issues are exactly the same. And you have this interplay between not I accept that I don't think there is in any way, shape or form anyone is going to monitor every single transaction. I get frustrated. I'm no crypto evangelist, but I do get frustrated with the belief that all crypto transactions are more bad than good. When actually you can probably consider the amount of cash transactions which are untraceable and how much nefarious and illegal activity goes on in cash transactions. So I think that the regulators have to learn and understand what they want out of the traceability and the pseudo-anonymity of cryptocurrencies. And they need to come to a proportionate response in terms of what they look for and when they look for it. But at the same time, if you can guard the on and off ramps to the cryptocurrency network, I think you should probably, to all intents and purposes, allow the transactions within the people within the network to take place, oversight free. And as long as you guard the on and off ramps, I don't think you've got much of a problem. And that's my personal view. I don't say that as a view of the Isle of Man government or anybody else. But right now, I think that otherwise, over-regulation is just going to drive, it'll probably drive everyone to Monero or any other kind of full and anonymous cryptocurrencies, and that's not good.
Agreed. Okay, I guess we've got a couple of minutes because we start a little bit late, so I'll finish with one, and bear with me. I'm going to ask you, do you have a view on CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies? China, we know, tend to be taking the lead, and the digital yuan, from what I'm reading, the plans are to roll it out for the Winter Olympics next year. We've read about Russia, Canada developing their CBDCs. We've not heard much from the UK or the Isle of Man, and I'm not going to ask you to talk too much on the Isle of Man there, but it's more a rounded question about, are all governments looking now at digital currencies? Is fiat currency in jeopardy? And do you see a day when the crypto market is as regulated as traditional markets? And if so, how far away is that? So hence I said, bear with me, there was a bit in that. Hopefully you followed.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing at this point? I don't know, but I think the pendulum will probably make them more regulated than fiat, and then we will probably come back a bit. I sometimes think about the multitude of different cryptocurrencies in the same way as back in the 14th, 15th, even the 18th centuries, you had different banks issuing their own currencies. Even on the Isle of Man, we had different banks issuing different currencies, and in the UK, until they were all harmonized under one fiat currency. So look, I think we've got a reasonable way to go yet in the maturity of a crypto digital currency. CBDCs, I'm a pretty big fan, actually, Kevin. I think that there is a lot to be said for a CBDC. Certainly at the intergovernmental settlement level, I think it's an absolutely imperative. I think that is the way that they're going to go, and pretty sooner rather than later. Retail models of CBDCs, that yes, you said People's Bank of China is forging ahead. Again, in the presentation, not only are we talking about wallet to wallet transfers and wallet to machine transfers of digital yuan, but also they've got cards. So those that aren't in the mobile phone, smartphone arena, you can have a card that's got liquid paper inside it, and the liquid paper acts as a similar kind of screen to your smart screen, and actually can show you what you've got on your smart card, as well as a smartphone. So look, they are forging ahead. They probably are going to be more fascist in the way that they oversee their transactions than other currencies and other jurisdictions, but definitely I consider them to be ahead of the curve. I mean, you didn't mention the e-krona. I think that the Swedish central bank and their program on the e-krona is going further than most other European projects, actually, even probably further than their near neighbour Estonia. And when you consider Sweden to be such a digital or electronic currency world anyway, there's a lot of non-cash transactions in Sweden. It's probably not much of a change for them. But I think that actually a lot of the Western and a lot of developed countries and developing countries' banking systems will need to change to take account of the way that CBDCs are going to work. No central bank itself is going to want an account for every member of its population and to manage those transaction flows. So there's a lot to be done yet, I think, in the background. And I do believe that it's not the technology that should drive the answer to a CBDC. You need to understand what you are trying to deliver as a social solution to digital currency first, and then choose your platform afterwards. One of the questions is going to be around the fiscal element and to a certain extent the monetary element. So the macroeconomic policies around a digital currency over fiat currency and currency in circulation in notes and coins, I think is going to be interesting. And that's going to take up some of the chief economists' thinking for a while. And in that respect, that I think is one of the main points that the UK and the Isle of Man have to consider when they consider CBDCs, especially in the Isle of Man, is the impact of that on monetary and fiscal policy. The way we set interest rates and the way we take interest rates from the UK and the way we set our own taxes. So there are some really big issues, I think, that have yet to be thought about at an macroeconomic level when you talk about central bank digital currencies. Hopefully that answered your questions, which were all.
It has indeed, and we're up on our time slot as well, and I'm out of questions. So if we can hand back and see if there is any audience questions. But yeah, excellent, Steve. You've certainly answered my queries and very informative answers as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. We also got a lot of clarity on how Isle of Man is looking at things. at the moment, and also like the way that you said that DeFi is an NFT space. Once you consider any of your digital asset to be a valid currency, then all of DeFi protocols start looking like banking entities, from outside. So a lot of good and bad can happen together. So obviously we need to plan the way ahead, perfectly. There is one question from the audience on a quick note. Is Isle of Man going to allow Bitcoin as a currency to pay taxes, for example? So yeah, that's what actually Kevin's partner and co-founder asked you. Whether taxes and
good question. I'm not a treasury
self-interested,
so I can't answer that. Yeah, I can't answer that on behalf of the Treasury. I don't see why not. If they recognised it as another currency, and I have addressed it with the government at least once. They weren't particularly interested the first time I addressed it a few years ago. So probably it's time to address it again now.
Yeah.
Well, what I can add, if I can just add in there, gentlemen, I mean, having worked with the Isle of Man government and Manuel and I working closely and being here in the Isle of Man as well, the Isle of Man government have definitely been very dynamic, very pro the industry and the sector. They've created a hub here for tech businesses, for the crypto space. And I think for any company looking at this space as a jurisdiction, for some of the reasons Steve has outlined, the Isle of Man is nimble, it's good, it's got great communication systems. So I think that the Isle of Man is a good hub for any international business in the tech sector. So I'd very much just like to say that for ourselves, Block Asset Management have an office here. We're very proud and very happy with our relationship here in the Isle of Man, and we definitely vouch for it as a jurisdiction.
Awesome. That's actually good to know for my own self as well. We'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your experience and knowledge with every one of us. We certainly have more clarity at the outset of how Isle of Man looks at it and is already considering it as a tangible thing, which is to be governed in the near future. And also the implications of how other protocols will look like eventually once we start seeing virtual currencies as real money. So thank you so much for outlining everything. It was such a knowledgeable session. I know the video quality was a bit rough for the audience, but we managed it through. We got our parts. So thank you so much, Steve.